Hey everybody, Ann Simpson here. Welcome to the budget part 2, Where Does the Money Go? So I know this is kind of a long one, kind of hang in there and watch it to the end. I think you'll find it very informative. Just want to let you all know the numbers that are in this presentation I took directly from the fiscal year 17-18 budget, which you can find on waxhaw.com. Also, for just the ease of simplicity of speaking, some of the numbers as I'm talking through them, I just kind of rounded them out. So hope you enjoy it and please send me your feedback. Here is the Waxhaw budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018. It's the adopted budget. It was adopted this year. You can find this document on the Town of Waxhaw website, and the actual budget ordinance is on pages 14 to 16, even though this document is 101 pages long. Let's take a look at where our money comes from. So the estimated revenue for this budget cycle is a little under $11 million, and $6.5 million of that is coming from ad valorem taxes. Now, ad valorem is a term that basically means taxes from anything of value. So this would be your property tax and your vehicle tax. Next, we have unrestricted intergovernmental revenues at $2.6 million. So this comes from such things as sales tax or franchise tax, and this revenue can be spent on any expense or what the municipality sees fit to spend it on. It doesn't necessarily have to go towards a particular item. Next we have is permits and fees. So this is where your building inspection permits and associated fees come in, as well as parks and recreation fees. So if you're renting a ballpark or a municipal owned property such as the McDonald House for an event, this is where those funds would go. We have investment earnings. So just like you might have a money market account at home, the town does as well. So investment earnings or interest earnings would be about $6,000 a year. We also have a miscellaneous at $11,000 a year. And then we have restricted intergovernmental revenues at $320,000 a year. So this would be things like grants. As one example is the town has received a TAP grant, which is a matching fund grant, and this would be the government's portion, and then Waxhaw would kick in their portion of that grant money. But they have to be used for the specific purpose for what they were given. So in the example of the TAP grant, that is money given to us to improve the sidewalks, roadways, and the walkability of the downtown Waxhaw area. And lastly, we have other financing sources at $350,000. Because ad valorem taxes make up such a large portion of our budget at $6.5 million, I think it's really important to understand how it gets broken down. Now, also included in that $6.5 million is the vehicle tax. However, I was unable to find exactly what percentage or a dollar amount that represents. So for simplicity's sake, I am actually going to use a 7% commercial tax base and a 93% residential tax base to break down this number and calculations. So the 7% commercial tax base generates $461,000 in revenue, and the residential tax base at 93% generates $6.1 million in revenue. Now, the problem with the residential tax base is it's consuming more in town services than it's providing in taxes. So it costs the town $7.9 million to provide those services, which we are losing 30 cents for every residential tax dollar we receive, or a loss of $1.8 million. Now you might be asking yourself, well, hey, how do we make up this shortfall every budget cycle? Well, the town has access to different categories of revenue streams, such as unrestricted intergovernmental revenues or permits and fees. So this is where this gets made up. However, we're actually robbing Peter to pay Paul. And over time, we are not going to be able to sustain this level of services, and I would suspect within the next budget cycle or two, tough decisions are going to need to be made whether to increase taxes, decrease services, or do a combination of both in order to maintain a balanced budget. Now on to expenses. Here are the operating expenses broken down by category in the budget, and because we are required by law to have a balanced budget, the expenses should equal what the revenue is, and that's just under $11 million. So over here on the right, we have a pie chart, and starting at the 1 o'clock position and working clockwise around, we have each category as well as the percent of the budget that it represents. On the left-hand side here, we have a list of each category and the dollar amount that is allocated for that department or that category. So for me, when I look at this and it says general government or culture and recreation, I'm not really sure what those figures represent or exactly what we're spending our money on. So in the next slide, in the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to take the operating expenses and break it down by town, division, or department so we can see exactly where our money is going. Here are the operating expenses broken down by town, division, or department. Now don't get too worried about the busyness of this slide. We're going to take each slice of this $10.9 million pie and go through each division one by one. Now I want to just point out a few things. As we go through each division or department, I chose the top 2 or 3 expenses within that department. What you're going to find as we go through is that payroll or salaries and employment costs are going to be the number one cost or the number one expense in each category. Now, everyone knows what a salary is. That's what their annual salary would be per year, but there's associated costs that go with that, such as overtime, Social Security tax, FICA tax, health insurance, employee assistant, or retirement. So all the things that you would think of as benefits. So that also has to be factored in addition to the salary. So the first division or department we're going to talk about is the Board of Commissioner expenses, and that is at $304,000, which represents 3% of our total annual budget. The Board of Commissioners, as well as the board and committee members that serve the town of Waxhaw, do receive a stipend, and there is FICA tax removed, so that is $101,000. We have legal fees, which is the town attorney contract at $140,000. Education and travel a little over $14,000, and outside agency funding requests at $10,000. Now I'll be talking a little bit more about outside agency funding a little bit later on in the presentation. The Building Inspections Department, their annual budget is $627,000, and it roughly is 6% of our total budget, and their salaries and employment costs are $450,000, and contract labor work is $60,000. So under this category, most of it just all goes to labor and employment. The Clerks Office budget is $193,000 per year, and that's roughly 2% of our annual budget. Salary and employment costs are $145,000. Recording, archiving, and codification is $16,000. Technology is $14,000, and education and travel is $13,000. Now, the Clerk's Office is basically the administrative part of the town, and they process all the recording, the archiving of deeds, the documents, they keep all the history, they also participate in the board and committee meetings and take notes, and they're responsible for maintaining and keeping track of all the town records. So if you have a record request, they would be the department that would process that. The Communications Division annual expenses is $72,000 or 1% of the annual budget. There's a consulting fee at $64,000 and the Village News at $7,500. Now, because Waxhaw does not have their own employees for a communications department, the town is elected to contract out those services. So what exactly does the contract services entail? Well, that is to ensure that they manage all the town communications. So they make sure there's a consistent message going out across all media platforms. So it's Waxhaw.com website, the Waxhaw News, Waxhaw Happening, social media accounts such as Facebook and Twitter, as well as they produce the live streaming of the Board of Commissioners meetings. And in addition, they have access to other experts such as photographers, videographers, print, and media. So they kind of control the message across all those platforms. The Engineering Division's budget is $549,000, a little over $500,000, and that represents 5% of our budget. You can see here the majority is made up of salary and employment costs, and then they also have consulting fees at $125,000. The Events Division yearly budget is $390,000 or 4% of our total budget. Salaries and employment costs represent $62,000. Ongoing events is $165,000. Christmas decorations are $15,000, and the first Friday night events is $12,000. The finance division's budget is $232,000, or it represents 2% of our total budget. Again, salary and employment costs is number one category. It's $151,000. The auditing services, because we have our books and everything audited, that's $21,000. Payroll fees are $19,000, and capital costs are $8,000. The human resources is $151,000, representing 1% of our annual budget. Salaries and employment costs are $104,000, followed by employee appreciation at $9,000. OSHA safety and trainings at $5,000, and that's to ensure that we are compliant with OSHA regulations. The Information Technology Division is $228,000, or 2% of our annual budget, and salaries and employment costs are $168,000, and technology support and equipment is $31,000. The Main Street Division's budget is $213,000, or 2% of our annual budget. Now, what the Main Street Division does is their role is in the preservation and economic development of the downtown Waxhaw Main Street area. So salaries and employment costs are $102,000. Consulting fees are $50,000, and that was a contract with Buxton, who's a retail consultant, and this is the end of a 3-year contract, so this fee will go away at the end of this budget year. Also, the Main Street Advisory Board is $26,000. Now they take care of things to make downtown and Main Street beautiful and pretty, which would be benches, banners, plantings, a Main Street application, marketing material, and then there's also capital improvement projects. So that would be $14,000. That would be the maintenances of the signs and public open spaces. We have a Parks and Recreation Division. Their budget is $287,000 a year, or roughly 3% of our annual budget. Their salaries and employment costs are $154,000. We have park expenses at $40,000, and then there is an outside agency funding request that got categorized under this too, and that's a little over $7,000. Planning and Community Development Division their annual budget is $545,000. It represents 5% of the total budget. Salary and employment costs are $360,000. The town has a facade grant program, and they allocate $50,000. And what that program is if a downtown business wants to make changes to the appearance of their structure, they can apply for and be awarded up to $50,000 to make those changes. They also have consulting fees of $50,000. Okay, the police department, as you can see from the pie chart, this represents the biggest chunk of our budget. So the police budget is a little over $3 million, and that's 28% of our annual budget. Salaries and employment costs is $1.9 million. We have a debt service, which is basically your mortgage payment or loan payment for the actual police station, the building itself. That is a loan that was taken to buy that building, and that is a little over $500,000 a year. We have vehicle maintenance, $112,000 a year. New vehicles or police cars would be $64,000 a year, and then they have to pay utilities on the police building that's there, and that is at $61,500. The Public Service Department's annual budget is $1.3 million, or 13% of our total annual budget. You can see salaries and employment costs are $500,000. The Powellville streetlights is $200,000. Utilities, which is the electricity we pay for the streetlights in the town, are $180,000. New sidewalks at $150,000, and transportation projects at $100,000. Now, our Public Service Department, they are the division that is responsible for the maintenance of our roadways, our streets, mowing of the grass, all those types of services. The Sanitation Contract, that is a little over $1 million, or roughly 10% of our annual budget, and that is a contract for garbage collection and our recycling. The town manager's office has a budget of a little over $1 million, or that represents 9% of our total annual budget. Salaries and employment costs are $230,000. We have a contingency fund at $471,000. That would be used for like emergencies or something that came up that wasn't factored into an expense category, that they just have that little extra cushion that they could use if they needed to. We need to pay rent on the town hall building, and that's $92,000 a year, and technology is $22,000 a year. The Waxhaw Volunteer Fire Department, and this is $24,250. This actually came in as an outside agency budget request for this year. They wanted this funding for purchase of an ATV so they could use it at events when they weren't able to maneuver through the traffic using other means. So this really isn't, this is just more of a one-time allocation, and they put it actually under a line item as opposed to just a general outside agency request. Every year, outside agencies request funds from the town of Waxhaw, and each year the requested amounts continue to increase. During fiscal year 2016-2017, the requested amounts exceeded over $90,000. In this current budget cycle, it was over $85,000. In the past, the town granted outside agency funding requests ranging anywhere from $40,000 to almost $74,000, with the money coming from the tax-generated revenues. Prior to 2015, all an outside agency would need to do was request funds. Town policies have since been changed and put into place, which require outside agencies to submit their organization's financial statements along with their request. This ensures the requested funds are not being used for the operational expenses of the agency, but used towards helping the citizens it serves. In the spring of 2017, the ETC Institute conducted a residential survey by mail, phone, and online in order to understand how well the town services are being delivered to the community. In addition, they were able to identify the citizens' top 3 concerns for the town to focus on the next 2 years. And what they found was traffic flow and congestion to be number 1, followed by maintenance of town streets and improving infrastructure, and 3, improving the parks and recreation. The town, being proactive, decided rather than wait 7 years for the Highway 16 widening projects, plans have been drafted to improve the intersections of Gray Byram and Bonds Grove Church Road. However, it is estimated to cost the town of Waxhaw up to $4 million or more to complete. So the big question is this: how do we pay for these projects? I am Ann M. Simpson, and I'm running for Waxhaw Commissioner. Please send me your questions or concerns, as well as any feedback that you have regarding my videos. I want to hear from you. Please vote for Ann M. Simpson on November 7th.